The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 4. Part 3. When Agnorok regained consciousness, he was tied to a pole. He was in an unknown camp, but it was a real pigsty. The environment gave off a very unpleasant smell. The head wound had stopped bleeding, but in return he had enormous pain in that area of the skull. He tried to find out where Arian was and heard the screams of the young woman. They were surrounded by bandits. It was a large group, more than a dozen, and they were groping the young woman. "Come, don't be shy. If you don't cooperate, we will kill your friend." Agnorok thought he was going to be killed anyway. The miracle was that he was still alive. Although some bandits usually kidnap people for very dark purposes. Rumors say that certain necromancers pay very well to have individuals with whom to practice arcane gifts. There are also cliques of vampires who buy victims to feed on. Sects look for victims for their dark sacrifices. Agnorok shouted at Arian, but could not see clearly. He tried to untie himself with all his strength, but it was impossible. Then he heard a bang and something falling to the ground. A huge silence was made. The half-orc feared the worst about Arian. If any of those bandits goes out of hand. Agnorok thought he heard something like, "Who the fuck are you?" Suddenly he saw a huge burst of blue light, a series of lightning strikes where the group of bandits was. Then some horrible screams of terror and pain. So frightening that Agnorok almost broke his arms trying to escape, but it was impossible. The half-orc had heard people dying many times, but this time it seemed that something was skinning their viscera. Gradually the screams ceased and a smell of burning flesh flooded the place. Agnorok saw a man crawling with his eyes out of their sockets, his face full of blood and his hair burned. He tried to say something to the half-orc, but the words did not come out. With his right hand he tried to point to something dark that was advancing towards the two of them. It seemed that it pointed to the same incarnate death. The half-orc had a hard time recognizing who the silhouette belonged to, but it was Gosberg or not. His countenance was totally different and his eyes shone with an intense blue hue. The Denka advanced with determination to the bandit. The poor devil carried a small crossbow in his left hand, with that weapon, and desperately fired a projectile towards the Denka. The shot hit squarely, right in the heart, but Gosberg did not stop. He just smiled slightly, and in that smile there was only terror. The Denka removed the ferret as if it were a blade of grass and continued to advance. The projectile had no blood. Both the bandit and the half-orc writhed in terror. It was not normal. That was not Gosberg. The Denka knelt in front of the bandit. His eyes flashed again with deep blue brilliance. He put one of his hairy hands full of blood on the bandit's forehead. Then the bandit's head exploded into 1,000 pieces, filling with brains and blood the half-orc, who screamed in a terrible way. Gosberg smiled, his eyes continued to shine. Well, they will not again disgrace the lives of innocents. But Agnorok couldn't speak. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had just witnessed. "Who the fuck are Gosberg?" The Denka smiled slightly. "All right, Agnorok, now that you know my secret, you only have two options, you know." "What are you?" Gosberg made a sign of silence with his hand and then untied the half-orc, who sat quietly trying to understand what had happened. Arian woke up a little confused. She was disoriented. The last thing she remembered was being surrounded by a series of smelly bandits who groped her with their dirty hands. Now, however, she was in her camp lying in place as if nothing had happened, but it had not been a nightmare. A pain in her lower lip indicated that everything she remembered had actually happened. "Madam, are you okay?" Arian screamed in panic. What spoke to him jumped back with tremendous agility. Then Gosberg and Agnorok arrived to worry about the state of the young woman. "Calm down, Arian, it's all over." The Denka approached and stroked her tenderly in the hair. "What was that? What happened?" Arian was a little disoriented. Gosberg smiled slightly and sat up. "We were attacked by a band of bandits and criminals. The truth is that it was a very dangerous rabble, but between Agnorak and I we managed to face them and we freed you before they did you more harm. It was more or less what she remembered, but the details of her rescue could not be corroborated in her head. There was only a fuzzy memory of a few cries of pain and despair, but little else. The young woman sat on her back on a large stone and put her hands to her temple. Thanks, my head hurts. Gosberg motioned for someone to approach the young woman. It was then that Arian saw the subject who had scared him. He was small in size, a little shorter than the Denka, a large hood hid his head. The only thing that could be seen inside the head was large yellow eyes with the pupil of a cat. Those eyes were the ones that had really scared her, since on the whole she looked like a rather innocent being. Here I introduce you to Vanus Sigfry, a Kendeli who had those enslaved bastards. The Kendeli bowed with her head. A Kendeli, thought Arian. It was the first time he heard that name. Of course in the world there were creatures of the strangest and unknown. At your service, madam. The voice of the Kendeli was soft and pleasant like a sweet whisper, just like the warm summer breeze that moves the leaves of the trees. Only listening to that voice Arian calmed down. Don't call me, my name is Arian. As you like. Gosberg withdrew for a moment from the couple and lit one of their cigars. The Kendelis are tremendously educated and helpful beings. The poor woman, from what she told us, was traveling with her parents in a wagon when they were attacked by the same band of villains who attacked us. The bandits killed her entire family and left her as a servant. Arian opened his eyes. It was a tremendous misfortune. And she thought her life was difficult. Sorry, Vanus. Arian got a little closer to the Kendeli, but she took a step back. She was very shy beings. Thank you, sorry, Arian. But we can no longer do but pray for their souls. Now if you excuse me, I want to see how your injuries are. Arian was very stubborn and got up. She was not willing for someone who was in such a dramatic situation to be her particular maid. Don't worry, Vanus, I'm fine, I can take care of them myself. Gosberg shook his head. Today we will take a day off, tomorrow we will restart the march. Where the Denka went that had disappeared like the first time, but none really wanted to know, they were deep in thought. The three of them were left alone. Arian, the Kendeli and the half-orc. Agnorak stayed away from the girls, because Vanus seemed to be female, with an absent expression. The half-orc's elusive attitude was something that surprised Arian. He seemed shocked by something that happened during the attack. As she didn't remember anything, she approached the half-orc to see if he could give her more information. Thank you for saving me. Agnorak seemed to come to his senses, although there was concern in his eyes. It is not my merit, I was well tied and it was impossible for me to get out. It was Gosberg who finished them all. I don't believe it. Agnorak nodded. The expression of the eyes of the worry half-orc turned to show terror. If you ever see Gosberg's eyes shine blue, run away as fast as you can. Agnorak was silent. Arian understood absolutely nothing. Perhaps it was the shock of the bandits' kidnapping. But that Gosberg had finished off more than a dozen bandits was something he could not believe, although Agnorak's expression was forceful enough not to doubt his words. Resigned, she lay down again, tired and bruised.